There was a moment in a Roman bride's life when the poetry ended and the paperwork began. Forget everything you think you know about ancient weddings. This isn't a story of romance, but of legal verification. It is 103 AD. A young woman named Claudia Antonia stands at the center of a system that views her not as a person, but as a pivotal piece of a binding contract. The public ceremony is over. The feasting has ended. Now she is led to a room in her new husband's house where the true meaning of Roman marriage awaits. It is a meaning etched not in love letters, but in law codes. The door closes behind her. Inside, it is not just her new husband, Lucius, who waits. A small assembly is present, an official witness called the pronoba, a priest, attendants, and a physician. Their presence isn't celebratory, it is procedural. In the corner, a mysterious object rests beneath a draped cloth. This gathering has one purpose: to witness, validate, and legally certify the transformation of Claudia from a daughter under her father's authority to a wife under her husband's. What unfolds next is a stark ritual of ancient law, a process so clinical that later civilizations would work to erase it from history. The key figure in the room was the pronoba. She was not a friend or family member, but an official witness, often a respected married woman. Her role was to ensure tradition and law were followed to the letter. With a firm and formal demeanor, she would guide the proceedings. Her first instruction to Claudia involved the draped object. "You must greet Mutunus Tutunus," she would state. This was the name of an ancient Italic deity associated with marriage and fertility. When the cloth was removed, it revealed a carved wooden statue or emblem of a phallic form. References to this practice survive primarily in the writings of later Christian authors like St. Augustine, who condemned it with disgust, calling it a shameful ritual. While its exact nature is debated by historians, the consensus is that it was a symbolic ritual of initiation and fertility blessing. The bride would perform a seated gesture upon or near the emblem. In the context of the night, its function was clear. It was the first formal witnessed step in a process that treated female fertility as a divine favor that needed formal solicitation and a legal prerequisite that needed ceremonial acknowledgement. For Claudia, this moment crystallized the reality of her situation. The crude songs sung by the crowd earlier, the stern advice from her mother, it all pointed to this impersonal, ritualized transition. Refusal was theoretically possible, but socially and legally catastrophic. It would mean the dissolution of the marriage contact, the return of the dowry, and permanent social disgrace for her and her family. The system offered no real alternative. Following this ritual, the atmosphere remained solemn. Attendants might assist Claudia with a ritual washing presented as purification. Then the physician would step forward. His role was perhaps the most clinical of all. For high-status marriages, it was not uncommon for a physician or midwife to examine a bride before the wedding to establish her virginity as a baseline fact. Now, after the ritual with Mutunus Tutunus, and later, after the marriage bed, the physician would conduct further examinations. Surviving medical texts from the Roman world discuss female anatomy with a detached diagnostic tone. In this context, the physician was not a caregiver, but an auditor. His examinations served a single purpose: to document physical change as empirical evidence that the marriage had been legally consummated. He was collecting data for the record. In the eyes of the state, Claudia's personal experience was irrelevant. Only the verifiable physical outcome mattered. This is the brutal logic of the system. When a person is legally reclassified as a conduit for property and lineage, their body becomes a site for official documentation. Consent, as we understand it, was not a legal component of the conventio in manus. The system operated on the assumption of compliance. With the physician's nod to the pronoba, this phase of the verification was complete. Claudia would then be led to the bedchamber. But even here, privacy was absent. The room was prepared deliberately. The marriage bed, the lectus genialis, was often positioned for clear visibility from the doorway. That doorway would remain open or, at best, only partially screened. The pronobo would take a seat nearby, present to hear and, if necessary, to see enough to provide definitive testimony later. Lamps were kept lit. This was not for ambiance, but for clarity. The entire setting was arranged to facilitate observation by the official witness. When Lucius, the husband, entered, he too was participating in a legal formality. Historical accounts suggest even husbands could find the witnessed nature of the ritual awkward or solemn, a performance of duty rather than an expression of desire. The pronobo would formally announce the next phase, declaring the marriage ready to be finalized according to ancestral custom and law. The subsequent act was not brief. It lasted for hours because its purpose was not intimacy, but the achievement of a medically verifiable outcome. The pronobo remained a silent auditor, ensuring due process. Near dawn, the physician would return. A final examination provided the last piece of evidence. The pronoba, having witnessed the entire sequence, could now give her sworn testimony if ever required in a court of law. Her word, corroborated by the physician's findings, made the marriage incontrovertible. Claudia Antonia was now, irrevocably, a Roman wife. This was not a rare or scandalous event. For centuries, among the Roman elite, this was a standard legal and social procedure. The system persisted because its core premise, that women were vessels for family continuity and property transfer, was universally accepted. Mothers prepared their daughters for it with whispered pragmatism, not celebration. This ritual framework did not end because Roman society had a moral awakening. It was dismantled by the rise of Christianity. As the new faith gained power in the 4th and 5th centuries, its doctrines directly challenged the old logic. Christianity taught the spiritual equality of souls within marriage, framing the union as a sacred mystery. The idea of a wife as mere legal property to be physically verified by witnesses became anathema. The old rituals were condemned, their symbols destroyed, and their memory suppressed. The Christian transformation was so successful that our popular imagination of a Roman wedding is filled with bright veils, torches, and feasts. The darker, legalistic machinery of the wedding night was erased, surviving only in fragments, in the horrified critiques of church fathers, in brief, opaque mentions in ancient texts, and in the cold logic of Roman law itself. Claudia likely lived a long life, raised children, and managed her household. She almost certainly never spoke or wrote of that night in personal terms. In her world, it was simply mos maiorum, the custom of the ancestors. The profound silence of Roman women on this subject is history's loudest statement. This story forces us to confront a complex legacy. Rome gave us foundations of law, governance, and engineering, yet it also constructed systems that could reduce human beings to legal categories in their most vulnerable moments. True history requires looking at both the grandeur and the gravity, understanding that the past is not a simple pageant, but a layered record of power, tradition, and the human experience within structures we can scarcely comprehend today. So we are left with a final, unanswerable question. In a world where such a process was normalized, woven into the fabric of law and religion, how did the Claudias of history reconcile their inner selves with their legal purpose? We have the records of the procedure. We will never have the record of the personal reckoning. That silence is perhaps the most enduring artifact of all. If you found this journey into the shadowed structures of the past compelling, please support our channel. A like helps this content reach others, and subscribing to Shadow of History ensures you don't miss our next exploration of the truths hidden behind the myths. Thank you for watching.